Hello and welcome to this presentation on marriage and parenting and intentional design for newlyweds. Let's go ahead and get right into it. So, what to expect after the honeymoon period? After the initial infatuation and the day-to-day realities set in, you'll discover issues in your marriage. Don't be surprised. This is normal. It could be simple things or it could be hard things. The most important thing is to be willing to do the work and focus on togetherness. And the Bible tells us that uh, wives seek to respect your husband, and husbands seek to honor and love your wives in Ephesians 5:22 and verse 28. So it's okay that things are not as they were when you first began. That is normal. Everyone goes through that. Next, communication. You have to learn to actively listen. A lot of times we spend time trying to formulate our response, but active listening means that you are hearing what your spouse is really saying to you rather than trying to get your point across. There'll be time for that, but you also want to make time to listen actively. And sometimes the message is blurred, and before you assume, try getting clarification, asking questions. The more you talk to each other, the more you will start to understand each other, understand how each other communicates. And be careful that when you are communicating, that you say what you want your spouse to understand and to know. Try to avoid talking around what you really want to say and be direct so they know exactly what you need. Let's talk about intimacy. Intimacy is something that you have to cultivate. Make it a priority to really know your spouse, not just romantically, that's important, but also as a friend. Do things together and create opportunities for deep connection to grow and to thrive. Spend time with each other and don't hide yourself away. Resist the urge to perform and instead push yourself to be vulnerable. It's hard. I know it's hard. Push yourself to be vulnerable. Don't let pride keep you from allowing yourself to truly be embraced. Conflict resolution. After intimacy, that should be a great place for conflict resolution to be able to mature in you. In Matthew 18:15, the Bible instructs us as believers to go to those whom we have an offense with. Don't let bitterness grow. Don't give it a chance to root deeply in you because it will show up in other areas. When the offenses come up, because they are inevitable, they will come up. Don't be shocked. Meet them with grace and be careful. Be careful how you communicate. Allow the fruit of temperance or self-control to be practiced. Remember that you can never take your words back. Words have been used by God to create, and your words will plant something in your spouse. Just make sure that it's a seed you want to grow. Now, let's move on to what the conflicts tend to be about. Finances. Finances are such a touchy subject, but establish a spending plan for the coming year. The best way to prepare your finances is to prepare your finances. Living within your means, that's budgeting in a nutshell, with one important addendum. For a spending plan to be really successful, it has to include provisions for keeping your ship afloat, even in the face of storms, emergencies, and other unexpected expenses. Life happens, you guys, and you want to make sure that you're prepared for those moments that you cannot control. And this is not a gender role assigned task. There are things in scripture that denote to gender, but this is not one of them. The person who's skilled in this area, it's okay for them to lead. If that's the husband, if that's the wife, whatever the role, whoever is skilled, whoever is gifted in this area, they should lead this area, because the overall thing is not for anyone's pride to be inflated, but for the team to succeed. Think partnership. Let's move on to after you've got your finances together, you're thinking about starting a family. If you're thinking about starting a family, here's some things to consider. Make sure that there is some level of stability that you can bring a child into. There will likely not be a perfect time where everything aligns just perfectly for you to have a child. If you're waiting on that moment to start talking about having kids or expanding your family, there may not be a perfect time, but there might be a probable time, or a time where it could make a little more sense to start to try to put this in motion. And have rich conversations. Don't be afraid. Have rich conversations around family expectations. What kind of schools? What kind of upbringing? You have to decide, what are the preferences and desires that we have for our children. If we're to start a family, what do we want that to look like? And a benefit to starting a family is that it teaches us more about a life of love that God calls us to as his children. And it gives us an opportunity to touch the divine and participate with God in making a new creation in his image. Amazing. Now let's talk about how children impact the marriage. So there can be two choices here. You can choose to let the pressures of adding children to your dynamic bring you closer or bring you farther apart. Remember, you are a team. Make sure that you prioritize your relationship, and remember that your covenant is with each other. Your kids will ultimately be happier if your relationship is intact. A relationship that is on the rocks with children, it's going to make them distressed. So don't allow the stress to make you feel alone in your parenting. And if you do feel alone and there's a lack, then communicate that sooner rather than later. Don't let things fester. Now let's go into parenting. The wonderful, beautiful, messy, tired, and amazing world of parenting. And although the world can be a scary place to bring children into at times, allow God to guide you on how to deal with your children. Extend grace to them. You are to a child of God. And so it can be so easy to lose your temper. It can be so easy to lack grace. But remember that these are little people who are in need of being taught. And extend them the grace that you would want extended to you, that you so desperately need God to extend to you. And don't be afraid also to be silly and just play, have a good time with your kids. Don't be afraid to engage with your inner child. And lastly, be united and come together as a team to support one another. Don't undermine each other's authority. If you disagree, talk to each other and try to come to a resolve. And understand that you guys both want the best for your children. So try your best to come together on decisions. Now, you may be tired, and staying connected and intimate after kids is hard. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen this movie. This movie is called Date Night. If you haven't seen it, it is worth a view. It's essentially about this very subject, staying connected and intimate after kids. This couple has kids, they go kind of stale towards each other, they fall into a routine, they're barely even really connecting to each other, and then they have this crazy date night where things just go awry. But one of the things that you can do to stay connected and intimate after kids is to have a date night. Not quite like them, but a consistent day, at least a few times a month, where you can come together and just connect without the distraction of kids or anything, where it can just be the two of you. And also just doing things together. Couples have said that just doing regular, ordinary things together can help to cultivate some of that intimacy and help them to stay connected. And pillow talk. Actually talk to each other about your life. Yes, you're living in the same house, you're partnering together, but you are individuals, and recount your day. Find out what really is going on in your spouse's life and take a genuine interest. And set boundaries for your kids. Maybe there's a time where you don't allow the kids in your room, or if you're co-sleeping, perhaps you're weaning them out of the bed, or if they're of age where they can just sleep on their own, then that you don't come out of your room and come into mommy and daddy's room at this time. So these are some things that you can do to stay connected, to make sure that that connection is alive and well between the two of you. Now let's switch gears a little bit to what role faith should play in your marriage. Ephesians 5:28 tells us that one of the beautiful purposes of marriage is to deepen our understanding of Jesus and his bride, the church. That is one of the biggest points of marriage. It is for you to grow in your knowledge of Jesus and his commitment to his church. That should inspire what the role of faith should be in your marriage. You should lean heavily on that message, because the commitment that Jesus shows to his church is the commitment that a husband is called to show to his wife, and the commitment that a wife is supposed to show to her husband is the commitment of the church to Jesus. They are for each other, and one cannot be without the other. They are for each other. So as long as you are married, and hopefully it is until death do you part, faith should be the center of your marriage. Faith should be the chair that your marriage sits in, that it's situated in. So faith is a big player in your marriage. It should not be a side piece. You should prioritize your faith in your marriage, because it's a threefold cord. God is the third member of your covenant, and you want to make sure that you are acting as such. Because times will get hard and you will have to lean on your faith. And you may not be able to lean on your friendship or lean on your love, but you can lean on the commitment of faith that you have in your heart to the Lord first, and then to your spouse. Now let's talk about the role of faith in the family unit. And the Word of God gives families instruction on how faith should be included, telling us in Proverbs 22:6. And the family should be the first place where Christian values and ethics are taught. Don't wait on the church to teach what you should be practicing in your home. Your children will experience God first with you. They will get their first impressions of faith from you. You cannot wait on the church or depend on the church. Although it is there as a means of support, it is not the vehicle for where your family first is introduced to faith, or at least it should not be. Now let's talk about this. No one really wants to get to